may have heard quite a bit about the Renters' Rights Bill, and you may well have heard all of us agents saying this, there's a lot to do with it, and lots going to change, and lots more for a landlord to do. And if you're managing your own property, I suspect you're thinking, is there really? We say this a lot, and I understand that point of view, but I thought it might be helpful for me just to explain, really kind of list the things that we're thinking about in terms of what we need to do for Renters' Rights Bill. And I'm going to need a bit of paper because it's a bit long. So the first thing we've got to think about is using the right tenancy agreements. So there's a new mandatory element called the written statement that's going to have to be issued. Now, we don't know what it looks like yet. When I implemented this for Wales, it was a very horrible exercise of lots of fixed terms you had to put into a tenancy agreement. We've done something similar in Northern Ireland, which was a little bit easier. They had a sort of 4-page fixed prescribed information you need to serve, but we don't know what that looks like yet. When that comes in, I will be making sure that all my offices have a scripted template to use, but that's a big one to get right, because if you serve a wrong type of agreement after the start date, you can get a fine straight away. So getting the tenancy agreement right. Making sure your rent's at the right level now, because there are going to be mechanisms around, more sort of promoted mechanisms around the rent tier tribunals. So you need to make sure you've got that rent level right now. I do that to prepare. You need to change your processes, because of course there'll be no renewals anymore, and there will be little problems. So you can't ask for rents at certain time before you've done certain things in the processes. You can't ask for rent up front. You need to make sure that you obviously don't discriminate against people. So your eligibility criteria, if you're not using a referencing company, needs to make sure that it's very fair, so that you're not exposed to those sorts of risks. You need to make sure the standard of your property is going to adhere to the Decent Home Standards and under AWAB's law around that sort of damp elements of the property, because there are some very strict time frames you need to follow to if something does go wrong around damp. And if you go outside of those strict time frames, then you are exposed to a fine and potentially rent repayment orders. So really important that you keep an eye out for all of that, get yourselves up to date with all the rules and regulations and follow those. You're going to have to make sure that you have all the right information at the right time that needs to go onto the new property landlord portal. And obviously there'll be a little fee for that. Make sure you register there, because again, late registration if you've let a property is another fine. And also register with the Landlord Ombudsman. And if you do have any complaints to the Ombudsman, you'll need to deal with those complaints. So obviously agents will be doing that on behalf of our landlords and submitting that evidence. And we've been part of Ombudsmans for a long time, and they're brilliant, and it's a really nice equitable way to resolve disputes. But having to put the evidence together is really time consuming, and you've got to make sure you've got your paper trail right so that you can put your best case forward. You need to understand the new processes for the acceptance of pets, because you have the requirement to consider and give consent and not withhold consent unreasonably. Make sure you don't fall foul of those rules, because again there are implications for you on that. You need to make sure that if you want to get your property back, you serve your notices correctly. Otherwise that's going to be very costly. We are all a little bit concerned around court delays, so it's very important that you get those notices right. And they're more complicated than they were now. Now we don't have the no fault eviction section 21 notice, so you've got to make sure you get those right. Keep on top of rent arrears, absolutely more than ever. And make sure that you have a decent rent guarantee product that's going to pay out when you need it to. And the kind of stress of making those claims is something which an agent with a good relationship with their provider can make sure that they alleviate. But make sure you get that product in place. I would really urge that as an important part of keeping yourself protected once the Renters' Rights Bill comes in. Make sure you don't ask for rent up front. Make sure you do your rent increases right, with the right paperwork, so that they are allowed. And make sure that you don't accept a higher rent than is advertised, or again, that's another fine for you. So, and also you've got to keep watching out. So whilst the bill is going to come in one main phase, there are regulations that are coming through later. So you can't just kind of sit on the internet and do all your homework and then relax. You're going to have to keep an eye out for anything coming down the tracks, which is kind of the job that I do for the agents that look after our landlords. So there's a lot to do to prepare, and if you need any help with that, then absolutely contact one of our agents and they'll be happy to help.